Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. It is the 12th of November and we are getting to a rather interesting period in the month. Before we continue with the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We have got wintry weather coming up. The finer details remain uncertain, but this is proof that I'm not a model watcher. If I was, I would probably chop and change my forecast 3 times a day. But this has been the ideas that I've had since way back over 2 weeks ago, that with the MJO moving into phases 7 and 8, it count 10 to 14 days after the fact, and we are now finally starting to see the models shift to where I thought they would go. So the Arctic oscillation is going into negative territory. It will recover. I have to admit that we will start to see a milder pattern return. Exactly when that will happen, I don't know. But look at this here with the NAO now, the North Atlantic Oscillation now tanking, or expected to tank. It's still slightly positive at the moment, but nonetheless, it is expected to go quite deeply negative. The last time we've seen this was the last time we were in phase 7-8 of the MJO back half of September through the first half of October. Then we've seen the recovery, phases 2, 3, then 4 and 5. We've seen the positive of the NAO, and now is going to where I thought it would take place. Now, this is the reasons why I think we are going to go into a milder pattern once again, and we are going to see that brief weakness within the stratospheric circulation as the heights come up over the Arctic region. Once they reduce, I think we're going to see a stronger vortex. But the reasons why is we kind of head into the null phase at the moment, so we're collapsing in phases 1, but then it comes back out into phases, 3? We could see storminess with that type of phase. Then it moves into phases 4 and 5, which is over the maritime continent or Indonesia. Once you start getting the convection over that part of the hemisphere, you would expect to see more the return of a positive NAO pattern and a milder regime overall. But I also want to show you in just a second the CFSv2 and a rather interesting change with that model, which has been refusing to go cold. It's just been showing milder than average, but we'll look at the latest of that in a second. But look at this here, extraordinary warmth over Iceland. At midnight last night, we've seen one location, which I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce, 22.9 Celsius. That is 0.3 below the November national record set exactly 25 years ago. This is a tweet here by Thierry Goose. So probably strong southerly flow on the western side of the strongest high anywhere in the northern hemisphere at the moment, in terms of the anomaly anyway, is bang slap over the UK and Ireland. We've had pressure as high as 1042 millibars, which isn't overly far off the November record for the UK, which is 1047, I believe. That was actually discussed in the live studio, the Met Office video back on Friday. But that is an astonishing reading that I wanted to share with you today. 22.9 Celsius. And what is even more fascinating about that is it was recorded at midnight. So, again, the presence of very strong southerly flow. But this is the CFSv2. So, milder upcoming 7-day period off the model. Remember, we are still to get to the cold spell, which is generally, it moves in the weekend, and then it's really next week that we see the full force of that here. Like I said, finer details remain uncertain at this time, so I'm not going to necessarily get bogged down with showing you 850 charts off the operational model, because we know it waxes and wanes. Some model runs give an extreme version, then it backs off slightly, and people are jumping on these individual runs, which is just a waste of time, really. And you could argue it's kind of clickbait as well. So I'm not really getting too interested in that. But this is interesting. CFSv2 now is showing in the 8 to 14 day a colder look. If we look at the upper setup here of the model, it's showing the high pressure over the Atlantic up into Greenland and the deep negative over Europe here. So this is almost textbook what you would expect to see taking place. And looking at precipitation for this time frame, so it is going to turn somewhat wetter as well. It's been week after week now, actually, of very, very little in the way of rain. Speaking of rainfall, this is the projection of the ECM between now and Sunday midnight, and very little in the way of moisture here, with the exceptions of Western UK, so West Wales, Western England, and western Scotland. The same for Ireland also. Very dry to pretty much no rain to the east of any hills here over eastern areas. We do have a couple of areas of concern across southern Europe at the moment, down to the south of Portugal. So the Algarve looks as if it's going to turn rather wet through parts of Gibraltar, Seville, these areas of far southern Iberia, and then around the Valencia area and even the Balearic Islands, we could see some significant rain. But it looks as if the biggest totals are generally between Sardinia and the bottom half of Italy, into the south of Greece and southwestern areas of Turkey. Looks quite wet, but we've got quite a dry Central Europe, as can be seen here in the ECM. We'll skip all the way out to the 22nd of the month. You can see it still a little dry here over eastern England, which is interesting. Wetter across the north of France, and we've got these areas of southern Europe around the Mediterranean basin that's quite wet. But we've got this swath of wet conditions here across the north of France, Belgium in particular, and then across northern Germany. What would that suggest to me? That would suggest to me, according to this model run, that may be where the cold front, the Arctic front, drives south, and it collides with a bit of a warm versus cold collision, which activates the frontal system and brings heavier precipitation. Lots of moisture across the Mediterranean basin, as can be seen here. But like I said, we have got the strongest, most anomalous area of high pressure anywhere in the northern hemisphere at the moment. This is the 500 millibar geopotential heights and the anomaly. You can see here a very, very strong ridge of high pressure bang slap over northern UK here. But it's generally, the position here is interesting, because if you look at this, the core of that high is generally between the east of Iceland and northern Britain. You've got very strong southerly winds between the trough over Baffin Island, southern Greenland, and the very powerful ridge to the east. You've got strong southerly flow, and that has been what's generated that 22.9 Celsius at midnight last night. And basically what has happened is we've had high pressure over the last week through the weekend, replaced by another area of high pressure, and that has allowed the pressure to become even stronger. So the pressure was strong last week, and then with that renewed area of high pressure, after I had a bit of a weakness over the weekend with a couple of fronts moving through, that high has then built back in from the Azores and really strengthened as well. You can see here the pressure at least 1042 millibars. Maybe there was a sneaky 1043 somewhere, I don't know, over Ireland perhaps. But generally speaking, I believe the November record for pressure at the surface is 1047 millibars. But that is the strongest high from what I can gather since January at the beginning of this year. My pressure rose to 1044 millibars back in January. Last night at 1041, that's the strongest since January. And there's only been, in the past couple of years anyway, since my station has been online, I've only recorded 1041, I think, 3 times. So another piece of useless information for you. Probability of snow. Again, this is off the GFS ensemble, and this is the probability of fallen snow. This is not me forecasting snow for a particular area, but you can see here, generally speaking, very much no snow at the moment to speak about. We've got some over the continent, if you notice here, northern Iberia, 3 parts of France, the Alps obviously, and that central swathe of the continent. But then as we start to see the cold coming south, as we move through the course of the weekend, it's really the weekend that's going to be the change, the big change to something quite significantly different. We've got 90% plus chances of snow over northern UK, as can be seen here. And we've got some increase in chances over higher ground of Ireland, Northern Ireland, England and Wales here, northern England, perhaps starting to see the snow. So, you know, it's not out with the realm of possibility to even see snow falling at lower levels. But how cold that air mass is going to be will still remain a little bit uncertain. And the position of the high versus the low, do we have an area of low pressure that can trigger a snow event, for example? Remember, this is still early. We're only in the month of November, and I think it's very easy to write off a given season based on what we've seen so far. I've seen a couple of comments back not that long ago saying that this is going to be the warmest, driest November on record, and the modelling wasn't showing the negative AO, the NAO, and I suppose you could very easily kind of slightly get fooled by what's going on. But if you try and understand a little bit more about how the atmosphere works, certain teleconnections and what they do when they're in a certain phase, you can really kind of override the models. And this is a perfect example. Even if this doesn't necessarily come off proper, you can see where the pattern has responded to that phase 7 and 8 of the MJO. So you can kind of, it's not overly rocket science, really, you know. And yeah, I'm quite curious to see this type of. We've seen significant cold spells before. I've never once mentioned 2010. I had one comment, one stupid comment. Actually, I have to just say it. Stupid comment on Facebook saying mentioning 2010, and then other times as well. And I'm like, I've never once mentioned 2010. This is going to be a typical late November cold spell with snow and cold and frost. We get it. It's November, but it's understanding the big picture. How did we get here in the first place? That's the point. It's not the fact that we're getting the cold and the snow. Yay, we'll want to watch here. It's the fact is that it's going from one pattern to another and then trying to understand the change and predicting it, forecasting it, even out with the models. It's better to then sit down and forecast a particular pattern. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But you can. I'm giving you the evidence, the reasons behind why I think a certain thing is going to take place. And this is the time for trolls. This is the time for people to jump on board. They're not around for several months during the course of the summer because it's not of interest to them. Then they jump on board and they just wait for you to kind of fall. And yeah, it's just one of those times of the year, unfortunately. And I suppose when you've got a growing and expanding channel, you know, it also creates a bad taste in some people's mouths as well. They just don't want people to progress in life. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent and I don't want to. Looking at current temperatures across the UK, then Europe, and then we'll kind of round up with that. Temperatures generally still relatively mild, 13 Celsius at Altnahara, a little cooler at Tain, 9. Then as we move southwards, only 6s around the Bishopton, Glasgow airport area. So we've got a couple of areas of chilly air, probably fog in amongst that as well. And then we've got generally upper single figures across the bulk of northern England, Wales, southwestern England. We've got slightly milder. I say milder. You're still only talking between 8 and 13 Celsius across the southeast of the country. Looking at Europe as a whole, this is how the current temperatures are looking as of, what time is that? Just after 20 past 4 in the evening. Sub-freezing temperatures are close to it. Eastern Europe, milder conditions across the west. We've got 20-21 Celsius, southwestern Iberia, and along the Algarve of Portugal at the moment here. Is there anything else to show you? Looking at the latest visible satellite imagery, we do have more weather, more wet weather at that, moving into parts of the Valencia area, eastern Spain. We've got more flood risk, unfortunately, across this area. Lots of cloud cover across France. There is more heavy rainfall here. Largely high and dry. Obviously, the sun is now setting, but we have got very clear skies here in northern Scotland. Probably some fog in the central belt, and imagine parts of other areas as well, seeing some foggy conditions. So I think I've spoken long enough. I think I've covered everything that I've wanted to cover in today's video. So yeah, before you leave the channel, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already done so, I would appreciate a subscription. It's absolutely free. 7 days a week content here on the channel, and we've got plenty of weather coming up as well. Some changes that may interest quite a lot of people. So enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. See you tomorrow with more. Bye for now.